It began with a prayer in Bethlehem, a soft murmur of faith that would soon echo in the thunder of cannon fire. In 1853, Europe still rested uneasily beneath the peace forged after Napoleon's fall. The map of the continent looked stable, yet beneath the calm veneer, rival ambitions and old wounds simmered. The Ottoman Empire, once the terror of Christendom, now staggered on the brink of collapse, mocked by diplomats as the sick man of Europe. But when empires tremble, vultures circle. To the north, Tsar Nicholas I of Russia dreamed of a Christian empire stretching from the Baltic to Constantinople, with the Orthodox faith as its banner. To the west, Emperor Napoleon III of France sought prestige to legitimize his new regime. Britain, ever the cautious guardian of the balance of power, feared that Russian warships in the Mediterranean might one day threaten India itself. All three powers claimed noble causes: the defense of faith, civilization, or liberty. Yet beneath those banners lay the oldest motive of all: dominion. The fuse was set by a quarrel so small it seemed absurd, an argument over who held the keys to a church in Bethlehem. But from that petty spark the fire spread until it consumed continents. What began as a religious dispute became a struggle for global supremacy. It was a war waged with rifles and telegraphs, with courage and confusion, a war of blunders and bravery, of saints and soldiers. Between 1853 and 1856, Europe would fight one of its strangest wars, a crusade waged in the age of industry, where faith met fire and the old order began to die. You are watching Erahive, where history speaks, the sick man of Europe. By the middle of the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire, once master of the Mediterranean and the Middle East, was collapsing beneath its own weight. Revolts flared in its provinces, corruption hollowed its armies, and Western industrial powers had outpaced it in science, trade, and war. The empire that had once humbled Europe now limped through the century, surviving only because its rivals feared what might follow its fall. To European diplomats, this fragile state became a puzzle they called the Eastern Question. What would happen when the Sultan's realm finally disintegrated? Would Russia seize Constantinople and control the narrow straits that linked the Black Sea to the Mediterranean? Would Britain and France allow the Tsar's banners to hang above the gateway to India and the Levant? In St. Petersburg, Tsar Nicholas I believed the answer was divine. He saw himself as the protector of Orthodox Christians, living under Ottoman rule, millions of souls who, he claimed, yearned for liberation. But behind that holy mission lay a far less spiritual ambition: warm water ports, trade routes, and power over the crossroads of the world. Britain watched uneasily. The Royal Navy ruled the seas, yet a Russian fleet in the Mediterranean could shatter that supremacy. France, newly reborn under Emperor Napoleon III, saw in the Ottoman crisis a stage upon which to prove its glory once more, and Austria, balanced nervously in the center of Europe, feared that a Russian surge southward might stir rebellion among its own Slavic peoples. Thus, one empire's weakness became every empire's obsession. In palaces and parliaments from London to Vienna, statesmen plotted and prayed, each claiming to defend peace even as they armed for war. The Ottoman Empire's sickness had become Europe's infection, and soon the fever would break in blood and fire. Faith and fire, when holy rivalries ignite a diplomatic inferno that will engulf the continent. Faith and fire. The spark came not from a cannon but from a church. In the winter of 1852, within the quiet walls of Bethlehem's Church of the Nativity, where Christians believed Christ was born, a bitter dispute erupted over who had the right to guard the holy keys and lamps. France claimed to be the protector of Roman Catholics in the Ottoman Empire. Russia, meanwhile, demanded recognition as the guardian of the Orthodox faith. For the aging Ottoman Sultan Abdülmecid I, caught between two jealous empires, the matter was more than religious, it was political survival. At first, the Sultan favored France, under pressure from Emperor Napoleon III, who sent a French warship to Constantinople as a not-so-subtle reminder of his might. But in St. Petersburg, the pious and proud Tsar Nicholas I took the decision as an insult to orthodoxy itself and to him personally. He sent his envoy, Prince Menshikov to demand that the Sultan reverse course and grant Russia an official protectorate over the empire's Orthodox subjects. But the Ottoman court, secretly encouraged by British and French diplomats, refused. Menshikov left in fury, declaring that Russia's patience had run out. The diplomatic quarrel soon filled Europe's newspapers. French journals warned that orthodoxy would suffocate Catholicism under the weight of Cossack heresy, while Russian writers thundered that the West had abandoned Christian brotherhood for greed. The clergy preached, the people raged, and behind their voices, ministers began drafting war orders. To the faithful, this was a clash of creeds. To their rulers, it was an opportunity to restore glory, to redraw borders, to prove whose God truly blessed them. The cross had become a weapon, and Europe was ready to use it. March to war, where diplomacy collapses, armies mobilize, and the first gunfire breaks the peace of Europe. By the spring of 1853, diplomacy had run its course. Prince Menshikov's mission had failed, and Tsar Nicholas I, his pride stung and his faith weaponized, decided that only force would speak for Russia. In June, the Russian army, immense, disciplined, and confident, crossed the Pruth River, occupying the Ottoman vassal states of Moldavia and Wallachia. It was not yet a declaration of war, but a clear challenge. To Nicholas, this was a holy mission to defend orthodoxy, punish the faithless Turks, and restore Russian prestige. But to the rest of Europe, it was an act of aggression. The Ottoman Sultan Abdulmejid faced a dreadful choice: submit and lose face, or resist and risk annihilation. In Constantinople, debate raged. The peace faction urged negotiation. The war faction demanded defiance. Even the Sultan's allies were uncertain. Britain and France offered support, but only in words. Yet, the Ottoman army, under the capable command of Omar Pasha, began to mobilize. By autumn, tempers snapped. On October 4, 1853, the Sultan declared war on Russia. Across the empire, the call to arms echoed in mosques and churches alike. The Tsar framed his campaign as a sacred crusade for Christianity, while the Sultan called for jihad against Russian invasion. Each saw himself as chosen by God. Each believed victory assured. The first battles flared along the Danube River, where Ottoman and Russian forces exchanged artillery fire amid the mist and reeds. Skirmishes in the Caucasus added to the spreading chaos. Yet neither side gained a decisive advantage. The war had begun not with triumph, but with hesitation and blood. Still, the old peace of Europe was gone. Diplomats, who had once spoken of compromise, now spoke of coalitions and vengeance. And as winter descended, both empires stared across frozen rivers and waited for reinforcements that would turn a regional war into a continental cataclysm. The drums of destiny were beating, and soon the world would hear them. Storm over the Black Sea. The winter winds of 1853 carried more than snow. They carried smoke and fire. While armies on the Danube waited for spring, the real disaster came at sea. The Ottoman fleet, led by Admiral Osman Pasha, anchored in the small harbor of Sinop on Turkey's northern coast. The men were cold, low on ammunition, and unaware that history was about to change forever. On November 30th, 22 Russian warships under Admiral Pavel Nakhimov appeared on the horizon. Their iron guns gleamed under a gray sky. The Ottomans, trapped in the narrow harbor, could neither flee nor fight on equal terms. When the first Russian broadside thundered across the water, the age of wooden navies began to die. For the first time in modern warfare, explosive shells were unleashed against wooden ships. The effect was catastrophic. Fire leapt from deck to deck. Powder magazines erupted into towers of flame. Within hours, 11 Ottoman ships lay shattered and burning, their sailors drowning or crushed beneath splintered masts. The town of Sinop itself was engulfed in fire as shell fragments rained upon civilians. Russia hailed it as a victory ordained by God. But in Paris and London, the world saw something else: a massacre. Newspapers cried out in outrage. The civilized world cannot remain silent. Public fury swept across Europe. Britain and France, long hesitant, could no longer stand aside. In March 1854, both declared war on Russia. The Tsar, once confident in his righteousness, now faced a coalition of the world's strongest navies and armies. Sinop had changed everything. It was no longer a regional quarrel, it was a European crusade, fought not for holy relics, but for pride, power, and prestige. And as the Allied fleets sailed through the Bosporus, one goal guided them: to strike Russia at its heart in the Crimean Peninsula. In the general most summer of 1854, the allies, Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire, set their sights on Crimea. The plan was daring and dangerously simple: invade the peninsula, capture the great Russian naval fortress of Sevastopol, and cripple the Tsar's power in the Black Sea forever. Yet, for all their confidence, the expedition was chaos from the first landing. When Allied ships anchored off Evpatoria in September, tens of thousands of men faced the surf and confusion. There were no maps, no clear orders, and not enough wagons or horses to move supplies inland. Soldiers waded ashore through crashing waves, dragging cannons by hand. Within days, cholera and dysentery swept through the ranks. It was not glory that greeted them, but misery. Still, the march to Sevastopol began. The first great battle came at the river Alma, where Russian forces waited on the high ground. For hours, smoke cloaked the valley as British and French troops advanced under brutal artillery fire. French Zouaves climbed the cliffs with fearless precision, while the British infantry stormed forward through grape shot and blood. The heights fell, but at a terrible cost. Thousands dead, the wounded left to die under the sun. Victorious but exhausted, the Allies expected the Russians to surrender. Instead, they regrouped deeper inland. The Allies turned south toward the port of Balaclava, where they built their base and where one of history's most infamous blunders awaited. On October 25th, miscommunication, pride, and confusion culminated in the charge of the Light Brigade. 600 British cavalrymen rode into the mouth of Russian guns, obeying a misunderstood order that sent them straight to death. The valley echoed with thunder and screams, a moment so tragic it became immortal. Balaclava was no victory, and neither side could claim the field. The Allies had landed, but they were trapped in a war of endurance, not conquest. Ahead lay the cold, the siege, and the slow decay of hope. By late 1854, the Allied armies encircled Sevastopol, the jewel of Russia's Black Sea fleet. What they expected to last weeks stretched into 11 months of agony, a siege fought not only with guns, but with endurance. The Allies dug miles of trenches in frozen mud, their camps sinking into filth and frost. Soldiers shivered beneath tattered coats, their boots rotting from the cold. The stench of disease hung heavy. Cholera, typhus, and dysentery claimed more lives than bullets ever could. Every night, the horizon flashed with artillery, and every dawn revealed a few hundred fewer men. In the British camps, incompetence deepened the suffering. Supplies piled uselessly at Balaclava's harbor, while starving troops froze on the front lines. Letters home described scenes of horror: horses eating their own tails, men gnawing on candle wax for food. The army was dying, not from war, but from neglect. Yet, amidst the despair, compassion took form. From a hospital near Constantinople, Florence Nightingale arrived with her nurses, disciplined, relentless, and armed with nothing but soap, order, and courage. They cleaned the wards, demanded sanitation, and defied military arrogance. Her lamp glowed through the corridors at night, earning her the name, the Lady with the Lamp. She could not stop the dying, but she gave it dignity. Inside Sevastopol, Russian soldiers suffered no less. Writer Leo Tolstoy, then a young officer, wrote of soldiers crawling through smoke, praying for survival, and losing faith in everything but endurance. The city burned nightly beneath the relentless Allied bombardment. Winter finally passed, but the price was unbearable. More than 100,000 men dead, most of them never seeing the enemy's face. Yet both sides refused to yield. And as spring dawned, the Allies prepared their final, terrible assault, one that would decide the war and the fate of the Old World. By the summer of 1855, Sevastopol was a city of ruins. Its harbor lay choked with sunken ships, its streets turned to ash, and its defenders, exhausted, starving, and broken, still clung to the ramparts in defiance. For nearly a year, the Russians had endured an unrelenting storm of shot and shell, and now the end had come. On September 8th, the Allies launched their final assault. The French, led by General MacMahon, surged upon the Malakoff redoubt, the strongest bastion of the city. The Russians, stunned by the intensity of the attack, were overwhelmed in brutal hand-to-hand combat. On the British flank, the assault on the Great Redan turned into a slaughter. Men climbed ladders into walls of flame, tripping over the dead and falling into ditches of blood. By nightfall, the exhausted remnants withdrew, but the French had done enough. Sevastopol could no longer hold. Under the cover of darkness, the Russians set fire to their own city. Bridges burned burned, ammunition stores exploded, and the once proud fortress fell silent. Nurse Alexandra Stakova wrote of the chaos. The whole city was aflame, the sky red, the air trembling with explosions. It was as if the world itself were ending. In March 1856, the Treaty of Paris ended the war. Russia surrendered parts of Bessarabia, gave up its claim to protect Ottoman Christians, and agreed to demilitarize the Black Sea. The Ottomans, Britain, and France proclaimed victory, though none could say what they had truly won. The Crimean War had consumed nearly 500,000 lives, most lost to disease, hunger, and incompetence. Yet it had done more than redraw borders. It had changed how wars would be fought and how nations would remember them. It was Europe's last war, fought in the name of faith, and its first war, waged in the age of industry. The last crusade had ended, and the modern world had begun. When the guns at Sevastopol finally fell silent, Europe breathed not in triumph but in exhaustion. The maps of 1856 looked almost the same as those of 1853, yet beneath their neat borders, everything had changed. The Crimean War had begun over religion, yet ended as something far larger, a warning from the future. It revealed that the age of honor and holy banners was dying, giving way to an age of iron, industry, and information. For the first time, war was shaped not only by generals, but by technology and the press. Telegraph wires carried news from the front to London and Paris in hours, while early photographers captured the faces of soldiers weary, dirty, and painfully human. The home front could finally see what war truly looked like. For Britain, the war shattered illusions of military efficiency. The scandal of mismanagement at Balaclava and the hospitals of Scutari provoked outrage and reform. Florence Nightingale's quiet revolution in medicine proved that compassion could be as powerful as cannon fire. For France, the conflict restored its pride under Napoleon III, though fleetingly. For Russia, humiliation became a catalyst for rebirth. The young Tsar Alexander II began modernizing his empire, abolishing serfdom, expanding industry, and reforming the army that had failed his father. And for the Ottoman Empire, the war offered only a temporary reprieve. The sick man of Europe still lived, but only because stronger nations wished to keep him breathing. The men who fought in Crimea called it a holy war. History remembers it as something else, the first modern war where technology began to rule over faith and the cost of progress was counted in lives. It was the end of chivalry, the birth of modernity, and a grim reminder that no empire, however righteous, is immune to folly. This was the Crimean War, the last crusade of Europe. If this story moved you, support our mission to keep history alive. Like, share, and subscribe for more forgotten tales that shaped our world. Join us again next time here on Erahive, where history speaks.